Hello! Today we're going to talk about shin splints, how to avoid them and how to recover from them for people who do a lot of hiking and running. If you're someone who does a lot of exercise on your feet, then you'll probably find at some point you will experience shin splints. Most of us have along the way. Shin splints can be pretty painful and really annoying, and if ignored can kind of just stick around and not ever go away, so it is important to pay attention to them and do something about them. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional, so if your symptoms do persist for a while, then do go see a GP, or at least, ask some advice from someone who is a medical professional. However, these are just some simple things you can do at home to hopefully treat from home if it is just shin splints, and if handled correctly, you can sort them out by yourself without additional medical intervention. I'm making this video primarily because of a request for advice from someone in the comments of a video a couple of weeks back, Anthony Johnson, who has a lovely YouTube channel, as I mentioned last week. I'll link it in the description again. But he wanted some advice on how to deal with shin splints, so that's why this is happening. If anybody else has any queries or worries or things that they want a little bit of extra advice on, I do have quite a few years of experience as a runner, both kind of as an amateur athlete and just a casual runner, so feel free to fire questions at me. The first thing to do when shin splints appear is rest. Essentially try and take 3 days off if possible and ice the shin for about 20 to 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times a day for those 3 days. Once you've done that, you don't then want to just dive straight back into whatever sport it was you were doing that caused the shin splints in the first place. You want to start building it back up a bit more gradually, which can be really frustrating if you want to get out there and do things, but it is definitely better in the long run to take things slowly. If your shin splints appear to be as a result of running or hiking on tough terrain, then perhaps consider doing some swimming or cycling, or just doing some local walks, short walks, to gradually build yourself back up. As well as altering the type of exercise you're doing during your recovery period, it's also a really good idea to check that your shoes fit properly. If your shoes are ill-fitting, or perhaps they don't provide the support that your feet personally need, then it might be why you're having some issues further up the leg, because if you've got muscle imbalances going on, your legs having to overcompensate in certain areas, it can cause pain and problems in other parts of the leg, so that's something to consider. Another thing you need to consider, even when you're just building back up gradually to the level of exercise you were doing prior to the shin splints occurring, is warming up properly. There is actually some doubt as to how effective warming up really is in helping the human body prepare for movement and exercise, but there is enough evidence to suggest that it's not really worth ruling it out as something that is useful. And it does make sense that increasing the blood flow to your muscles gradually as you're building up to doing your main exercise is definitely helpful for the muscles, especially if you're someone who perhaps doesn't do a lot of sport and goes out for a hike or a run maybe once a week, a couple of times a month. It's really worth considering doing 5 to 10 minutes of warming up beforehand. Tying in with this, after you've finished your exercise session, whatever it is, it's still a good idea to stretch. Whether you've been out for a hike or a run, you should do some kind of stretching afterwards to make sure the muscles are cooling down properly and that they can recover effectively from the exercise that you have just done. And I'm not really mentioning shins specifically in all of this, because if you're looking after your legs as a whole unit, then it is more likely that shin splints are going to be less of a problem. If you have pain appearing anywhere in your legs, whether it's shin splints or in your hips or your knees, it's usually an indication of something is out of balance elsewhere. So looking after everything, stretching out all your muscles, warming up all your muscles will help balance everything out in the long run. A really important thing to add into your schedule as a runner or a hiker, whether you're serious or casual, is some strength training. Feel free to refer to my previous video if you want some ideas on simple exercises you can do for your hips, knees and ankles at home with minimal equipment. But it is worth considering looking into a more serious strength training routine if you are wanting to make sure that your legs do stay really strong and stable all the way into old age, essentially. This strength training obviously ties in with the warming up and the cooling down and looking after your legs as an entire unit, because if you're keeping your hips, your knees and your ankles really strong, then you're not going to encounter as many problems and your risk of injury will be a lot lower in other parts of your leg. So things like shin splints just won't really happen if everything else is really strong. I haven't really talked about using painkillers as a quick fix for shin splints because I personally am not a fan of using painkillers as a way of treating any kind of sport-related pain. Painkillers will inhibit your ability to realise when something is wrong, and if you can't tell when something is wrong, then it's going to make it a lot harder for you to realise when to stop, when to hold back, when to make sure that you don't push yourself to a point of greater injury. There is also some very compelling scientific evidence to suggest that using things like ibuprofen alongside running and hiking can actually do some quite serious damage to your kidneys, so definitely bear that in mind if you think, oh, I'll just use an ibuprofen to make my knee hurt a bit less. I would very much think twice about doing that just because of the potential long-term harm you could do to yourself by relying on that as a method to treat pain. It's obviously a lot harder work to do the strength training and making sure you're warming up properly and stretching and all this stuff, and it is a lot easier to just take a painkiller, but the long-term effects of doing regular strength training and stretching properly are just so much better for you, and you can keep going and doing the same things that you're used to doing way into old age. I'm pretty sure if you look after all of your joints and your entire body as a unit. If you're still in the stage where you're resting after realizing that you do have shin splints, then you can also massage the shin area to help out a little bit. For this, you can just use your hands, or if you've got something like a baseball or a lacrosse ball, basically like a hard ball, you can use to roll over the shins. That can help. Or if you own a foam roller, that's also a really good tool to have. And they're pretty cheap to pick up if you just want to get one to make your life a little bit easier. This will probably offer a bit of short-term relief and might help a little bit in the long run. It's not something that I think really contributes massively towards helping things like shin splints and muscle pain, but it can offer that kind of short-term relief just to make you feel a little bit better that day or that evening. So key things are to remember that you need to rest and ice shortly after realizing that you do have shin splints, and then ease back into your activity gradually, preferably using lower impact exercise to keep your cardio up while not putting so much stress on your shins. When you do start to build your activity back up, make sure you're warming up properly, cooling down properly, stretching really well. It's also important to remember that warming up properly, cooling down properly, and stretching out the muscles all over your legs is really helpful in just generally preventing injury. Making sure your shoes fit properly also helps in making sure you're not encountering any sort of muscle destabilization through poor fitting shoes. And engaging in some kind of strength training is really good for the general longevity and ensuring that things like shin splints are much less likely to occur in the future. So that was a pretty short video. I just wanted to throw some advice out there on dealing with things like shin splints. This doesn't just apply to shin splints. All of that advice can basically be applied to most minor injuries that hikers and runners are likely to encounter. Most important thing is just to listen to your body. If something is hurting, keep an eye on it and make sure you're not pushing yourself beyond your limits. Pushing through pain can often just have long-term negative effects, and you might cause yourself a lasting injury, which obviously you really don't want, because it'll inhibit your ability to enjoy the activities that you like doing as you go forward into the future. I hope you found that useful in some way. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're interested in general hiking, outdoors type content, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. While the lockdown is active in the UK, I'll be doing more videos like this because we can't get out and do things at the minute, and it's pretty frustrating, so I'm just going to try and offer these little advice videos where possible. So yeah, hit subscribe if you're interested in that kind of thing, and check back on some of the older videos on the channel to see what kind of thing I do get up to when we're allowed to actually go places and do things. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.